What's up? Welcome back, everybody. Today's video portion is going to be really short. I want you guys to kind of focus in on some devotional style questions, um, and answer those really for yourselves. You'll turn those into me, but those will be private. Nobody else will see them. I think this idea of Jesus proclaiming to be God should cause some questions. It should cause some reflective questions. Even there's so many implications, and honestly, I've barely begun to scratch the surface as far as what it means that we have this God who showed up to us in flesh. And so, why don't you take some time to look at these questions, and I'll share these questions with you, um, and write them down or screenshot them if you need to. But check this out. Um, so I'll blow that up. Here we go. Jesus, God a human. I messed that up. It's supposed to say God as a human. Sorry. God as a human. And so here's some Devo questions that I want you to answer. Think about these questions, respond to them, and respond to them in ICE form. You'll see the assignment, but this is really just for you to think about. Okay, what are some characteristics, qualities that make humans human? When you think human, how would you describe a human? Alien shows up. What do you describe humans as? How do you explain a human? What does it mean to be a human? Think about those things. And then I also want you to think about Jesus. What are some characteristics, qualities that you think of when you think about Jesus? So think about Jesus' qualities. And then on top of that, what are what are some characteristics and qualities that you think about when you think about God? When you think of God, what are his characteristics? What are his qualities? What comes to your mind? So here's what I want you to do. Pause right here. Stop watching. I'm going to take your word for it that you did it. Again, I'm not grading for right answers. So this is just for you. This is just purely reflective. So when you turn this into me, it has nothing to do with how correct you answer these things. It's just going to help piece some things for us. So pause right here and go ahead and start answering these questions. And then when you're done, come back to this section of the video. All right? See you in a bit. All right, I'm going to assume that you paused. If you did it again one more time, please pause right here. Go back and do it. If not, let's continue. So I don't know what you wrote for your characteristics and qualities as a human, but it's interesting to know. Did you write anything about humans being broken or sinful? Um, I think a lot of times when we think of humans, we think about humans because all we know is a broken human state. But humans weren't meant to be broken. And you can even tell in the way that we talk about our mistakes. Like one of a common phrase that we say when someone makes a mistake is, "Oh, I'm only human." That's something that we say to excuse ourselves for our mistakes. But when Jesus shows up, remember that second Adam statement? Jesus shows up as the second Adam. You know what that means? What that implies? That Jesus shows up to show what it's like to truly be human. In other words, Jesus is the image of what a human should have been. A human was supposed to look like that. And so that's that should completely flip the way you think about that. So, which brings up to the next question. When you think of Jesus, what are some characteristics, qualities that you think of? Be interesting to see what your answers here are going to be. There's one or two ways this usually goes. Sometimes people emphasize the human qualities of Jesus. We'll say things like, he was peaceful, he was loving, he cared for people, he prayed for people, he was generous, he was humble. And I pause there, and if you wrote things like that, look at your qualities right now. Are the qualities that you just wrote about Jesus, um, qualities that you can find in a human. Like, there's nothing unique about those qualities. Like, all the qualities that you listed about Jesus may have just been purely human qualities. Like, they're just qualities of a good human, basically. Um, and maybe you forgot to write about his godly qualities, meaning, think about this: Jesus is omnipotent. Remember those big words, those characteristics about God? Jesus is omnipotent. And maybe you wrote them in the what characteristics and qualities do you think about God? And maybe for God, you wrote omnipotent, you wrote omniscient, you wrote all powerful, you wrote wrathful, you wrote powerful, you wrote creator. But everything that you may have written in the category for God is also true of Jesus. And everything that you wrote in the category for Jesus, most of it is probably true of God. God is loving, God is humble, God cares. These are all things that are also true about Jesus. Isn't that nuts? It should be nuts. I hope it's nuts to you. So when you think of God, do you tend to think about his real distant qualities? Maybe that's why God seems distant to you. Or do you think of, when you think of Jesus, do you think of just his human qualities? And maybe that's why Jesus doesn't really seem like a grand figure to you. So it'd be interesting to see what you wrote there. And so, um, here's a follow up question. And when you when you look at Jesus, um, what does it mean that, how does it change your view when you start to think about Jesus as the second Adam, as him being truly human? How does that maybe change your view of him? How does maybe that change your view of you? How does that change your view of humanity in general? So answer that question too. Include it in your ICE assignment, and that'll be your assignment for the week. Just dwell on these things. I want to see what your responses were, and then actually, let's throw in this last question. Based on the fact, you know, it's kind of this question: how does thinking of Jesus as human, as a perfect human, change your view about humans? Well, how does, if this isn't clear, essentially what I'm asking here is, how does seeing Jesus as the perfect reflection of God, like what we see in Jesus is what we would see in God, in other words? For a lot of us that are like, I just don't get God, I don't understand God. Well, that's why Jesus was sent. He was sent to clear up misconceptions. So if you see Jesus as loving, guess who else is loving? God, the Father who is in heaven. Vice versa is true too. We tend to think of, oh, God's wrathful and angry. God's wrath is Jesus's wrath. Revelation tells us that Jesus has wrath to pour out when he returns. When he returns, he's going to redeem those who have believed in him and pour out wrath on all the evil and injustice of this world, including the evil and unjust people. There's wrath in Jesus. We see a little bit of that in the temple. When he clears the temple, he gets full of wrath, righteous wrath. He flips tables. He starts whipping at people and driving them out of his father's house for turning it into a den of thieves. And so, how does seeing Jesus as God and human change your view of God? Change your view of maybe Jesus? And so, how does that, did this maybe point out some misconceptions that you had in you? If you had any, write it down. Again, there's no real length. I just want you to be thoughtful in your answers. I'm not looking for a specific word count or anything. Think of this more like a devotional. Okay. Think of this like if you were doing a Bible study. I want you to answer that way. Okay. Personal pronouns, fine with me. I just want you to be thoughtful and courteous. Maybe there's some things you need to repent of. Repent of those things. That's fine. I don't know. And if there are, you don't have to write them to me, but definitely write them somewhere. Maybe some of us just need to get on our knees and say, "Man, God, I have all I've done is made you a bigger version of me, but you are not just a bigger version of me. You are something different. You are something eternal and much bigger than my mind could understand." Well, I love you guys. I'm praying for you. Can't wait to see your answers. Oops. I really hope you've already stopped watching because I'm just fumbling through Zoom. All right. Bye.